Imagine entering the Vatican or standing in the center of Mecca and finding no crosses, no crescents, and no Kaaba. Instead, every wall, every altar, and every holy site on earth bears only one image, a single golden solar disk. In this alternate reality, the only permitted depiction of the divine is the Aten. It is a sun disk with distinct rays extending downward, ending in human hands that reach out toward worshippers. The man who designed this symbol was Pharaoh Akhenaten. Mainstream history usually dismisses him as a delusional dreamer, a fanatic whose obsession with a single sun god nearly destroyed the Egyptian empire. Akhenaten represents history's first and most radical social engineer. This network diagram illustrates the math of ancient religion. Polytheism is a logistical nightmare for a dictator. When a state has thousands of gods, it requires thousands of competing priests. Those priests own vast tracts of agricultural land, hoard wealth, and command the loyalty of local populations. The pharaoh might sit on the throne, but the priesthood actually owns the state. Akhenaten recognized that if there is only a single god, there is only one flow of resources. By eliminating the vast pantheon of deities, he cut out the middlemen. He made himself the sole earthly voice of the Aten, funneling all land and wealth directly through his own position. Monotheism functioned as a political technology designed to grant him total ownership over the state's resources and the people's reality. By 1340 BC, this vision took physical form in Amarna. It was Akhenaten's brand new, entirely centralized utopian capital, built from scratch in the desert. Inside the city, the pharaoh focused entirely on his new religion. Outside, the empire lost ground. The Hittite military was advancing from the north, capturing Egyptian territories, while Akhenaten actively ignored the urgent dispatches from his generals. Meanwhile, the traditional power structures he had displaced were simply waiting. Down in Thebes, the defunded priests of the old god, Amen, were quietly whispering about treason. Akhenaten died in isolation inside his utopian bubble. He left the throne to a 9-year-old boy, Tutankhamun. The old regime immediately manipulated the child king into abandoning Amarna, reinstating the old gods, and chiseling his father's name off the monuments. His system collapsed in a matter of years because he divorced his internal ideological vision from external geopolitical threats. From a political science perspective, Akhenaten made a specific, fatal error. He was an effective visionary, but an amateur at hate management. The mechanics of power dictate a simple rule for transitions. To replace the deity of an entire population, a leader must allow the people to keep their traditions while simply changing the name of the entity they are worshipping. Akhenaten bypassed this entirely. He abruptly outlawed the old gods, confiscated their temples, and assumed that exposing the population to the logic of the Aten would be sufficient to sway them. Truth is rarely enough to sustain absolute power. To keep a population compliant, a dictator requires a compelling myth and the credible threat of violence to enforce it. Imagine the timeline where he corrects this mistake. In 1340 BC, instead of retreating to his temples, Akhenaten listens to his generals. He takes the hoards of gold he confiscated from the priests of Amun and uses it to buy mercenaries, constructing history's first ideological army. He treats the Hittites as enemies of the light. He hands his generals the state treasury with one condition: every conquered city must immediately erect an altar to the Aten. This map shows that alternate reality. Egypt extends into a superstate, swallowing Assyria, Persia, and Rome. The cultural fallout is absolute. With one god enforced globally, the branches for resistance religions vanish. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam never develop. In a world where the sun is the only god, empirical observation becomes a religious duty. Since the Aten is the physical sun, worshipping it requires a rigorous understanding of its light and heat. By 500 AD, this mandate would have likely transformed the study of physics and astronomy into the primary act of state devotion. The Aten effect would have altered the subsequent 3,000 years of human development. But we don't live in that timeline. Today, Akhenaten is just a strange face carved into scattered limestone blocks in museum display cases. He developed the methods of total ideological centralization that modern states still utilize. His system collapsed because he attempted to impose this centralized model on a fractured Bronze Age society, without first building the massive military force required to suppress the priesthood. Akhenaten's failure reveals a cold truth. He recognized that a single god is the most effective weapon for mass compliance, but he simply forgot to load the gun.